Hey, good afternoon. This is kind of a cool way to do this. I was looking forward to seeing everybody in person, but this is the next best thing. I want to thank everybody who was part of compiling the questionnaire. Um, I want to let you know I have answered all of the 44 questions. We're trying to figure out a way to make it available to you online easily, because there's not a list right now that we could easily distribute it to. But of course, if you want to discuss anything in the questionnaire, we can just go through it as we talk. I'm going to talk generally just for a few minutes, try to keep it brief because I want as much time for questions as possible. I really respect the intelligence and the hard work and commitment of everybody on the phone, everybody in our movement, in our revolution movement and the Bernie movement that gave birth to it. As many of you know, I co-chaired Bernie's campaign in the state, and I traveled around the country with him, encouraging others to support him across the country, came in, support him in New Hampshire, and went all the way through. This campaign is really about extending Obama's legacy and making Bernie's vision real. The line that we start with Obamacare leads towards single payer. It doesn't lead towards Trump care. We will make sure that there is single payer in Maryland. Similarly, we will make sure that there's a high quality teacher in every classroom. What we're really focused on, quite frankly, is a back to basics approach to get our state and its institutions to work for everyone in a way that empowers people to make the most of their time on this planet and to make the most of the American dream, to make it real to all our families. So we'll make sure that everybody has high quality health care. We'll make sure that every teacher, every classroom has a good teacher. Everything else we want to do with public education really is leveraged off the quality of our teachers. And that means that they have to be properly, competitively compensated. It means that they have to be continuously trained. It will mean that the casino money will actually have to be spent to enhance our school. And we can no longer avoid having a tough conversation about the priorities of our state. That was the promise made to voters. The Kirwan Commission will tell us that there's $1 billion to $2.5 billion shortfall, and there's about $1 billion that comes from those casino revenues, and so it should be filling that gap. Similarly, we will make sure that there is universal pre-K, and we won't stop there. We will keep trying to find ways to get better education to our young people, all the way down into that year, those critical 0 to 3 years, where right now we have a real crisis as far as affordable preschool in this state, affordable childcare. I'm raising a 4-year-old, an 11-year-old, and an 18, now 19-year-old, it's all very, very clear to my family because we struggle with it too. Similarly, with regards to education, we will make sure that community college in our state is tuition free, and we won't stop there. The reality is that public university tuition used to be able to be paid all your fees, expenses with 9 hours of minimum wage work per week. Now that's up to 47. And that means that it's beyond the reach of many young people, but many others are driven into debt. And so we will get back to where we used to be a long time ago in making public university tuition free. And we're doing all of this really to make our state as competitive as possible, to make it as innovative as possible, as attractive a place to build a big business, but also as easy a place as to start a small business. We will close corporate loopholes. It's part of how we will fund this. We will end mass incarceration. That's savings is part of how we'll fund this. But we'll also invest in growing our state. That means from the bottom up and from the top down. From the top down, what we're talking about is really doubling down on the strengths of Maryland. A lot of those are in technology. They are in health tech. One of the things that's great about our state is that this is a place where the tech community is focused on solving real problems. You don't see a lot of new Snapchat type apps coming out of Maryland. What you do see is people trying to solve cancer or cybersecurity. And as somebody who invests in tech for good, invests in social impact startups, and who mentors at the Johns Hopkins University Accelerator, I can tell you that we could go a lot further in leveraging Johns Hopkins as the world's greatest health sciences campus, which it is, the way California has leveraged Stanford as the world's greatest computer science campus, and linking Johns Hopkins to University of Maryland and our public HBCUs and all the other great STEM campuses, the way that California has linked Stanford ultimately to UC Berkeley and all of its great public universities, and in California, Hispanic serving institutions. And so we will, whether it's Baltimore or the I-270 corridor, really triple down on building out health tech. Similarly, in Prince George's, we have a hidden county. If you saw the movie Hidden Figures, 30 Black women who helped put a man on the moon. We have the greatest concentration of blacks in STEM in that county of any place in the country. Santa Clara County, where Facebook is, has 1,300 computer professionals. Prince George's has 18,000, a little bit less than 18,000. And that means that as Facebook and Google and others seek to build expansion campuses, we luring them here to the I-95 corridor from Prince George's to downtown Baltimore, because we have a greater pool of diverse computer science talent than they do in California. And it's a way for them to access, and it's also more affordable to be here. So it's a way for them to access more computer programmers. They're facing a 1 million programmer shortage there in just a few years, but also a more diverse pool. They're under a lot of pressure to make their workforce more inclusive. They have less than 3% black programmers. Companies out here tend to have about 18%. And that will also mean, frankly, more opportunity for everybody, because blacks will still be a minority in those companies. So it means more for everybody. You do those two things, and you also start to build clean tech in our rural areas, Eastern Shore, Western Maryland. For instance, we will deploy, when I'm governor, loads of wind turbines off the southeastern shore of our state. If you look at the plan that folks like Josh Fox and the Sierra Club have put together for how each state can achieve 100% clean and renewable energy by 2050, and my goal will be to do it by then or faster. For Maryland, it means we have to disproportionately invest in offshore wind. Those turbines should be built here, should be maintained here. Similarly, we should invest in building solar panels here and other forms of clean and renewable energy. Wayne Gretzky said he profited in hockey by skating to where the puck is. And the reality is that the puck, energy production in America, is racing faster and faster towards clean and renewable energy. Price comes down, the power of the technology goes up. And the states that really make themselves hubs, regional hubs, for the production of those technologies will prosper, not just in the long term, but in the midterm. It's also really important, and hear me here, sisters and brothers, it's really important if we're going to, frankly, working trades unions properly aligned with the rest of us in the progressive movement, we've got to pull them away from the oil and gas industry. And the only way to do that is for clean tech jobs to begin to become good union paying jobs, not just $15 per hour good jobs, but like $60 per hour jobs for machinists. And building things, jobs that require a lot of skilled labor, like building and deploying and maintaining turbines, are the type of work that we can do that with. Education, I'm trying to think, public safety. We will also, quite frankly, as we downsize our prison system, we will do that primarily by making sure that addicts go to rehab, not to prison, making sure that mentally ill people through Healthcare for All get mental health care, not prison. Dealing with our urban housing crises, where we have loads of vacant housing across cities like Baltimore, and yet lots of homeless people, figuring out good solutions to house the homeless. But at the same time, frankly, we will build out homicide units in cities like Baltimore to make sure that we can get the shooters off the streets quickly, more than any other factor. And I teach criminal justice policy at Princeton University. Things people tend not to know about me is I invest a couple of days a week in Startups for Good, and I teach a couple of days a week at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy at Princeton University. And when you're looking at what police can do, because there's really a lot that needs to be done throughout the ecology of a city like Baltimore to bring down the violence, but what the police can do to make a city safer is to make sure that shooters get off the street quickly, that they're caught quickly. More than, like how long they're going to go away for or whether they get the death penalty doesn't seem to impact whether or not they shoot and kill somebody. But if they believe that they'll get caught quickly, that's the one thing you can do to get them not to shoot somebody. And that means that Baltimore, to bring down its murder rate, to bring that down, they have to bring up their homicide case close rate. That means that you have to shift officers away from the misapplication and of the so-called broken windows theory and all this focus on nonviolent lifestyle crimes, and get them focused on catching shooters, catching pimps, catching rapists. And so we will make sure that there's proper investment, people can feel safe again. Baltimore County, 2/3 chance you get caught if you kill somebody. Baltimore City, 2/3 chance you get away with it. We will fix that. But we will also go deeper, because the reality is that whether you're in West Baltimore or you're in Western Maryland, a city like Cumberland, when the jobs leave, the drugs pour in, the violence goes up. And so things like raising the minimum wage, for instance, they don't just help an individual or his family or her family. They also pump money into the neighborhood and help small businesses flourish. Kind of two last notes, one on small businesses and one on the Trust Act. On the matter of small businesses and really building from the bottom up, we talked a bit about building the economy from the top down. From the bottom up, there's no replacement for an organically growing economy. And so that means that just as we'll take some of the money that we've become comfortable gambling on luring corporations to our state, and we will invest it in another type of economic risk-taking with obviously the goal of building our economy, which is backing the banks in our state to deploy cutting-edge computer technologies that allow them to assess risk earlier than they normally do, so that they can get lines of credit out the door earlier than they normally do. Right now, you have to wait till you have 2 years of tax returns in order to get a line of credit. A lot of companies a lot of companies grow themselves nearly to death in those 2 years, or they become reliant on factoring, which eats away their profits. We can empower our banks to use cutting-edge technologies to better analyze risk at 6 or 12 or 18 months than they're able to do at 24 to 30 to 35 months when a company finally has 2 years of tax returns. And therefore allow our small businesses, the detail shop, the flower shop, the startup, to grow faster earlier. Finally, again, kind of pragmatic, back to basics. Let's get our economy working for everybody, get our schools working for everybody, get our hospitals working for everybody again. We will pass the Trust Act. And in part, we'll do it not just with good organizing and advocacy, but by using the bully pulpit of the governor's office to talk both from our heart and our head. As progressives, we're quick to talk from our heart, to say it's the right thing to do, dignity for all, defend human rights, and all of that's true, and we will continue to talk that way. But we'll also talk from our head. To understand the sanctuary cities movement and how it starts, it's helpful to first remember that a lot of the ideas that today's Republicans criticize were started by yesterday's Republicans. Richard Nixon signed into law the bill that created the Environmental Protection Administration. Trump's essentially trying to destroy it. Mitt Romney created the seed for Obamacare, Romneycare. Trump's trying to destroy it. And similarly, while they're beating us up about sanctuary cities and threatening to defund cities, all of that really starts with a very conservative police chief in Los Angeles named Daryl Gates. You may recall him from Rodney King infamy. He stood up to the INS like a broken clock. He was, or maybe a broken digital clock, he was right once. Analog would be twice. I'm not sure he was ever right twice, but he's definitely right once. He stood up to the INS. This is kind of the last thought, and then we'll take questions. And the INS had come to him, and they said, look, we want your police officers to also act as immigration officers. We want them to help us deport people. We've got a list. And he said, I can't help you. So you bring me an actionable warrant for somebody who you believe is committed like a felony or a serious crime. Well, I'll help you like I'll help serve any other warrant. But if you just bring me a list with a bunch of immigrants who have stayed, past their date and came into the country without papers, there's nothing I can do for you. So my officers are police officers. They're here to make people safer. That's their only job at the end of the day. And with the moment they become immigration officers too, said the immigrants will stop talking to us. Not like some of them, like all of them. Because they'll be afraid one way or the other that they'll be implicated in somebody in their communities, family being torn apart. And they will become less safe. And that will make us all less safe because they will stop talking to the police when they need us. And ultimately that will make crime in our not just their community, but our entire city grow. So then those criminal networks will start to target them specifically because they know that they don't talk to the police. And it will just go from bad to worse. So no, thank you, but no, we will not be pretending to be immigration officers. We'll stick to our knitting and stay police officers. And so we will also, as we pass the Trust Act, talk about it in terms of simple public safety, even as we affirm our core values of human rights and human dignity. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. There's a lot covered in this, these 44 questions, and we're working diligently to make sure that all of you can access that as soon as possible. Thank you, and God bless.
Any questions, you should press the chat and send in your question. Oh, here's one. Here's a question, Ben.
Sorry.
Here's a question, Ben. How do you beat Hogan, and why are you better positioned to beat him than the other candidates? And I would add to that, than other candidates who claim to be progressive, some of whom have very progressive records in this state.
Sure. No, look, absolutely. Kind of a few pieces to that. First of all, we got to remember how Hogan won. Hogan won by 63,000 votes in a year that was a flood tide for Republicans and an ebb tide for Democrats. That year, he got about 60,000 of those 63,000 votes primarily from rural or Republican counties where voting had surged 15 to 30% above historic levels. For that reason, we don't believe he can get many more votes. But second, 125,000 Democrats who had turned out in 2010 did not show up in 2014. And we should not just assume that the sort of energy we saw, say, at the Women's March or the activism in the few months after Trump came into office will sustain for 2 years. The reality is that when you look at why folks didn't turn out, critical margins of folks didn't turn out in 2014 or even 2016, it really comes down, polls suggest that they felt betrayed on the economy. There was not a compelling reason for them to turn out. Their problems weren't being addressed. I'm the only candidate in this race, for instance, who stood up for single payer. Clearly, now look, other folks say the public option, but anybody who knows the issue with any sort of subtlety knows that the public option will all but foreclose us going to single payer. And so it'll be that sort of courage, clarity, and frankly, pushing solutions at the actual scale of the problem, not half measures, that will inspire constituencies to turn out. But we will also go further. In 2012, when I was president of the NAACP, Van Jones referred to the NAACP under my leadership as the unsung hero of the 2012 election, because we put 1.3 million unlikely voters into motion, got them to the ballot box, got them voting. In fact, there was a point in Chicago where the Obama campaign was quoting our voter registration numbers to their own staff because the NAACP effort was going much stronger than theirs in 2012. We ran the #1 door-to-door voter registration operation in the country. So we will build a movement. We will build a movement by inspiring people with bold ideas that help, that add up to real change for them and their families. But we'll also build a movement as experienced organizers who are skilled not just in the art of inspiration, but the science of voter mobilization. We will deploy that better and more thoroughly than anybody else. My campaign manager is a guy named Travis Tazalar. He was on the Bernie Central Committee with me. In 2010, he ran the coordinated campaign for the state. He's a 39-year-old former U.S. Marine, never ex. And he, that year in 2010, they put 120 paid organizers on the ground to turn out the vote. In 2014, it was 15. So we are full-throated, full-range Democrats, unafraid to talk about ending poverty and expanding opportunity, as well as unafraid to talk about defending civil rights and human rights. It's that full range that will help us inspire people, but it's the science and our years of knowing how to turn folks out that will make us the best bet to beat Hogan.